Hi, everyone. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. I'm excited to bring you a really interesting company, especially with COVID-19. It's called LiveProcess, and we're here with Terry Zysk. She's CEO of LiveProcess. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself and really kind of the background of LiveProcess. It seems like you have a really interesting history of how LiveProcess came to be.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So a little bit about myself. I've been in software and healthcare technology for many, many years, probably 20 plus. And over that time, I've done two different things. One, I've focused on software startup companies and software restarts, if you will, helping them bring new technology to market and prove their value proposition with early adopters. And early in my career, I was actually a software developer many, many moons ago and learned all about the application and creation of technology at Fortune 100 companies. So I've been lucky to have both ends of the spectrum in that I've got a technical background, got extensive business background, and I know and understand what technology is and how to apply and adapt it. And that's kind of how I got over here to LiveProcess. I knew the founder. His name is Nathaniel Weiss. He's a serial entrepreneur. And in founding LiveProcess, he started the company back in 2004, around the time, you may recall, Hurricane Katrina and the devastation that the people felt from that storm, their inability to get access to health care, the inability of our infrastructure to just get to those people and provide them with food and water and just basic care, and then all the devastation that surrounded that hurricane. So what he set out to do, like many companies at the time, of course, was to create a technology company that was focused on crisis and emergency management. And specifically what he wanted to do was focus on the healthcare sector. Many other vendors that were out there were looking at FEMA and public health and public safety. He wanted to focus on the healthcare side of it. So he built out this company and a technology platform that deals with crises that start with the preparation and planning phase and goes all the way through the mobilization response and then ultimately the cleanup phase that happens at the end. And I'm through the chairman of the board, he's the person that I worked with at another healthcare company, and we decided to partner together, and now we're here.
That's awesome. I mean, it's amazing the innovation and the things that have come out of Katrina. I mean, a disaster that really inspired a lot of people and a lot of people in healthcare. I've seen so many presentations about being prepared for those type of situations, but it really sounds like LiveProcess was built for a COVID-19 like situation. So what are some of the stories from your customers that have been using LiveProcess amidst this pandemic?
So, thanks. That's a great question. And actually, we say that quite a bit. We like to think that we were purpose-built for COVID. We actually were built around Katrina, which set the stage to be able to handle things like COVID-19. And of course, we lived through Harvey and the crazy Atlantic hurricane season of 2017. So a little bit about, how we've dealt with the pandemic. You'll hear the same things from us that you hear from the newscasters about dealing with ICU beds and do we have enough beds and do we have enough negative pressure rooms. We've, of course, dealt with regional and federal public health agencies to coordinate resources and getting access to things that are in short supply, PPE and masks and ventilators and things of that sort. So we've been involved in all that, in addition to monitoring the occurrence of COVID patients and having them show up on your doorstep, then the exposure to all of your employees and how do you track all that. The list goes on. Two stories are kind of interesting. One, just to give you some perspective of the size and scope of the challenges that people were faced with. We work with Riverside County, California, the healthcare coalition out there, and it consists of 17 hospitals. Amongst those 17 hospitals, there's easily hundreds of people that are coordinating and collaborating with each other on a day-to-day basis throughout the COVID crisis. What they've done is they've set up their COVID event, and they manage to work and share information with each other every day. They are able to track the availability of capacity and resources anywhere in the region, and they've been successfully able to move around people to provide care, as well as equipment and supplies to fulfill the delivery of care throughout their region. They're the one really good example of large-scale coordination in a large-scale situation, and just keeping things moving forward with just basic supplies. And then the second story that I'll tell if I have a moment is it's with Penn Medicine. They have been a customer for several years now, and this is a story that tends to not really get a lot of press or publication. In this scenario, you may recall, shortly after COVID and all the lockdowns, there was a lot of people that were coming into the cities, and there was a lot of peaceful protesting that was going on. And at one point early in June, there was quite a bit of activity in Philadelphia downtown. And of course, that's where a lot of Penn Medicine hospitals are located. The police department, because of the worries about peaceful protests turning into something else, they set up a series of blockades. And while that might be okay to mitigate the risk to all the people that are doing their peaceful protesting, what it also did was prevent access for cars into the city because of road closures. Major access points from the highways were totally blocked off. And you had to navigate through those police barricades in order to get into the city. So now we're talking about a health system that is located in the city with many hospitals and facilities, 30,000 some odd people, right?
Yeah.
How do you get in touch with all those people and just inform them what they're supposed to do? So with the help of our technology, they've been using it for years, as I said. They keep their events up and running on a regular basis, and they are constantly proactively managing and monitoring warning signs and things that are going on in and around their area, not just what's happening at their hospital. And what they ended up doing was, in working with Incident Command that was located in the city with the police department, along with their own emergency operations center, they established a set of procedures and protocols about how to navigate the barricades, where to get through, how to get through, what to do when you got stopped at the barricade, and then what to do when you couldn't get through the barricade if you couldn't for whatever the reason might be. And they were able to disseminate those policies and procedures in a matter of minutes to their entire population. So, the end of the story is people got to work. And as simple as that sounds, people got to work. It was pretty powerful when you think about what they were faced with in trying to get all of their employees to cover the next shift. Were they going to be able to get in for 3 o'clock in the afternoon or not?
Yeah, and I think we were all dealing with plenty of stress. We didn't need one more stress, which is, I got to get through the police barricade to get to work. That had to be frustrating from an employee perspective. So, what are go ahead.
I was going to say, think about getting stopped at a barricade, having someone ask you some pretty intimidating questions. They're dressed in their intimidating outfits, let alone, and all you're trying to do is get to work. And there's probably a line of people, and everybody's getting frustrated. So.
Sure. Yeah, and you never know what's around the corner, right? So it's interesting. I mean, at the core, I thought this was a communication platform, which it sounds like that's a core component. But it was interesting you talked about even like bed capacity and ICU capacity. So what are the core features of a real-time situation management platform like LiveProcess?
Well, there's several layers to that question, and I'm glad you asked the question because it is so much more than communication. historically, way back in the beginning when people started creating their crisis and emergency management platforms, they really focused on the communication aspect of it and the ability to reach large volumes of people in minutes. And the phrase or the term mass notification came into being. So in the early days, a lot of people just asked for, do you have the ability to do mass notification, which is one aspect of communication.
Sure.
What we took on were different levels. Do you have a question in there, or do you want me to go on?
No, please go ahead. I think, communication's needed, but I'm interested to hear what else there is.
So what we did is, as we may or may not have mentioned in the early stages of this conversation, we've got our core emergency management and crisis and incident management platform that is built for situations like COVID. We also have a new platform that we call LiveProcess Aware that's specifically designed for this type of real-time situation management. And it's unlike these other systems that, there's systems in healthcare for secure texting. They deal with clinical collaboration. There's crisis management, as I mentioned, mass notification. We've combined all of that capability so that we have a single flexible solution platform, if you will, that's easy to use, that's comprehensive, and handles all types of scenarios. And not only does it do communication, it does coordination. It allows people to collaborate. And as I get into the details, I'll talk a little bit more about what those features are. The important point to make about it is we've been in this domain for nearly 20 years now, and we've always worked very, very closely with our customers. What we have today in emergency management and what we have today in our real-time situation management platform, Aware, is based on nearly 2 decades of experience working with those customers, dealing with these situations, and creating mechanisms and techniques for them to be able to perform the coordination and collaboration they need to in order to get past these situations. And not only is it our opinion that we did it right, our customers are saying that we really have something that meets their needs. And once they've figured that out, they don't really want to leave us, and they're very happy to stay with us for many, many years. So a little bit about what I think those core capabilities are. So first and foremost, I'll just start with the foundation. At the foundation level, I think having the ability for clinical people, operations people, and environmental people, those are all different departments in the healthcare system, having those teams be able to work across department boundaries and work as a single team is essential. That's like, fundamental building block number one. Allowing them to interact in ways that they couldn't interact prior. Before this, they'd be calling each other on the phone, they'd be sending an email. With this platform, they had the ability to reach each other at the drop of a hat. The other piece is that within this, triumvirate of resources, they have the ability to share insights. And an insight that you might share from an environmental standpoint about weather has an impact on schedule in operations and has an impact on who's coming into the shift and who isn't, and whether doctors need to be in the building or not to be able to perform elective procedures. So all of that makes a huge difference. One tiny little insight has an implication across the entire company and the entire enterprise. And then when there is a situation that's out of the norm, being able to work together and respond in unison without delay is another key element of foundational material that I think is important in one of these platforms.
I think that's a really good point, because when you look at the secure communication platforms that are out there, they're so clinically focused that they don't include a lot of the operational or environmental ones. So that's a great example. What else is in the platform?
So within the pot, if you open up we open it up and see what's inside now. There's 4 fundamental capabilities that allow those groups of people to work together. The first one is what we call the community directory. And think of that as, it's a contact repository in its simplest form. But what it does is it lets people find the resources that they need. They don't have to know their names. They just have to know what that group of people might be called. Are they charge nurses? Are they the emergency response team for heart attacks? Are they a rapid response team? Are they the safety department? That's all they need to know. And they can quickly find the resources that they need within that community directory, not have to worry about how to get a hold of them, not have to worry about the best contact means to get a hold of them. We worry about all those details, but all of that is built into this, what we call community directory, that gives you, pinpoint access to who and what you need as soon as you need it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
The second piece is what we call event management. Now that's built on concepts from healthcare where as you've been in any kind of a healthcare situation, you're in the hospital, you hear somebody call code blue over the intercom, and you see people running. They just react, and somebody already knows what they need to do. That's pretty standard operating procedure that's kind of ingrained in clinical workforce. Yep. We designed event management as a mechanism to essentially notify a group of people, a very specific group of people, about a well-known occurrence, something that they all understand. Let's use code blue as an example. With that notification going out to that right group of people, it serves as a call to action for that group of resources to go do whatever it is that they need to do, follow their procedures. Now, not only are we sending them an alert that basically says, trigger action and go do something, we provide the essence of what they need to know about the situation, essentially everything on a single page or within one notification that they need to know in order to go forth and deal with the patient that is in distress in one way, shape, or form related to the code blue. And all that does is leverage their innate need and ability to react when they hear that there's a crisis situation. We're informing them in the drop of a hat, and they go off and they perform whatever they need to do very quickly. The outcome is better quality metrics, better care metrics, shorter time to care.
When it goes to their mobile phone or something, I assume, so then they're not, you're not warning the whole hospital there's a code blue and stressing out the whole hospital. You're only giving it to the people who really need it to address it. That's great.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you've been in hospitals. So that does cause a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety when it goes over the overhead. So it actually goes to the device of preference for the person. So it could be personal mobile device, could be their work mobile device. It could be other forms of communication depending on whether they're at home or in the shop at the time or wherever. So yes, that's we allow for a lot of personal preference to receiving these notifications too.
Good.
Another set of capabilities is something that we call situation management. So I just talked about events. Situations go beyond events. They're collections of events. They're collections of actions and activities. They may be triggered by an event. COVID-19 is an event. Flu season is a situation. COVID-19 is a situation. The first patient coming into the hospital with COVID-19 is an event. So that kind of gives you an example of the distinction between them. But a situation is a long-running activity that unfolds over a long or an extended period of time. It involves lots of different people, more than one group. Within each of the groups, they have different activities and responsibilities that they're required to perform. And all of that needs to be orchestrated and managed in unison in order to get from point A to point B. So we've created this concept of managing a situation in an environment where people are all connected, information can be shared instantly across everyone that needs to know the right level of information, and they have the ability to coordinate and orchestrate their activities.
It's interesting you talk about it from that perspective because, when I first thought about talking with you and hearing the story of Katrina is kind of a one-time event. There's, you have to deal with it, and maybe it lasts for a month or whatever that you have to deal with, some of the crisis around it, but then it's done, right? There is an ending to the Katrina event, if you will, and certainly you have to be aware of future hurricanes and things, and certainly the code blues come throughout, but there's an ending to the specific code blue. It feels like with COVID, it feels different because is there an ending in sight? And maybe I'm biased by my own personal, but has that been different from your guys' experience working with customers that that COVID-19's crisis situation really is a different way and has to be managed a little different because of the unknown endpoint?
It is actually very different. And thanks for bringing that up. It's something I like to talk about. Just like you mentioned, a lot of these other scenarios had a beginning and an end. They have a recovery period, of course, some shorter or longer than others, but they were also based on things that we sort of understood.
Yeah, that's true.
So, right? So hurricanes, we know what hurricanes are. We know there's going to be flooding. We know there's going to be a lot of rain, heavy wind. We need to make sure that we have gas in the generators and all of those things. COVID had many different characteristics. And I think there's probably three or four that I'll mention. One, we went from managing a situation that, like you said, might occur once or twice a season to something that involved daily management and dealing with changes that happened on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So we went from flu season occurs, we get an influx of patients, we deal with them, and then flu season is over, to today I have how many patients, tomorrow I have this many patients, now I need this many beds. I mean, the situation was constantly morphing, and with new information about how to care for the patients, protocols were changing, process was changing, capacities were changing. So that's one aspect that made problem solving happen every day, all the time, throughout. Another is with the amount of stress that was put on the way people conduct their business. Again, healthcare, even though it's a crisis-oriented environment, people have protocols and standards and traditional ways that they need to deal with their patients and whatever situation might occur. In the COVID scenario, we put strain on supplies, we put strain on process. We didn't know what the best treatment protocols were for our patients, and we didn't have any point of reference to build on in order to figure out what the right protocols were. So the third part of why COVID is different, like you mentioned, is the length. So many of these things have the chance to run through their cycle. You figure out what you did wrong, you do your hot wash after the event, and you figure out how you're going to do it better next time. With COVID, we're looking at not being done with the first round, and we've got these little peaks and valleys that are happening now as we open up society more and more. And guess what? Flu season is around the corner, and there's likely to be another wave. I don't think we've ever dealt with something on this scale before, where we're not even done with the first one and the second one's happening. Yeah. So those, I think, are some of the biggest things that make COVID so unique and make this such a complex set of scenarios and situations to deal with.
Yeah, and it's so regional. In some cases, it's almost like a continuous wave of, and even the science behind it is moving so quickly, and how you respond to communicating that is such a challenge, for sure. Were there other parts of the platform that are important too? And feel free to talk more about COVID.
Sure. Well, there was one other thing about COVID that I wanted to mention is, and this is kind of what we all forgot while we were in the middle of COVID. We just kind of pushed it off to the side, but nobody thought about it until afterwards. We repurposed everybody in the hospital to go focus on COVID. We repurposed beds, we repurposed departments, people with, critical care skills. They became ICU nurses, and they became COVID nurses and doctors. And by doing that, what we did was we took all of our capacity that might have been in clinics, that might have been doing day surgeries, that were doing elective procedures and knee surgeries, that were treating strokes and STEMIs and all these other kinds of typical things that just happen. All of that capacity got repurposed, and all of those people got focused on COVID. We didn't run the hospital. We focused on COVID and treating all of our COVID patients. So this next time around, a key thing that we need to figure out is, how do we balance, and this goes back to the platform, ultimately, how do we balance what goes on with a crisis situation like COVID that puts strain and unique demands on our resources and capacity, but also manage the hospital and keep the hospital in balance and care for the patients? And situation management, collaboration, virtual connectivity amongst everyone. Those are all core capabilities of the platform that make that happen and make that possible.
Yeah, I mean, it is such a challenge. My cousin is a nurse, and she got her unit converted to COVID, and then they saw no
Yeah.
patients, which, what a waste of resources. And it was stressful. I think it was more stressful for her being bored and wishing she had something to do and stressing over what's going to happen than if she actually had patients. So, it's definitely something that needs to be worked on, that we can find the right balance, which is the challenge during a crisis. So, um, I think that is one of the other things I was thinking through as I prepared for this interview was, people are amidst this crisis. They're dealing with it. Like, can you implement a solution like LiveProcess, like while you're dealing with the crisis, or do we have to get through the crisis? Or have you had experiences implementing your software amidst the crisis, and what's that been like?
Yes, and it's been fun.
Putting the
So
boat
a couple of
together
things.
while you're going into the water,
I'm sorry?
is it like putting the boat together while you're going in the water, or what do they say, building the airplane while you're taking off? Is that?
Building the airplane while it's flying. So that's the typical one, is we're building the airplane while it's flying. And yes, we have direct experience doing that too. So one of the fundamentals of making that possible, that I didn't mention when I was talking about platform capabilities, is the thing has to be simple. If it's not simple and easy to use, if it's not intuitive, nobody's going to use it. And we've learned from our customers, it kept us honest to make sure that we've kept things simple and straightforward and obvious how to use it. And the example, one of our recent customers, they just signed up with us in February this year. They're called TIFT Regional Health System, and they're in Georgia. They're a regional health system. They're on the outskirts of Atlanta. They're in the southern region, and they basically are set up as an organization to pick up excess patients from some of the primary care centers or the primary big city hospitals when they're beyond capacity and there's a big situation. So these folks, they're off in their area. They're getting ready for a LiveProcess. They're all excited. They're, looking at the software, because as soon as they sign up for it, we turn them on right away. We give them an account so they can get in right away. And, they're in there poking around, looking at things. And we were in the process of scheduling our first kickoff meeting with them to get started. And Eddie Senkville, the emergency management coordinator, saw that the first COVID cases were coming to their region and were going to be crossing their doorstep.
Wow.
And he didn't have time to wait for our first meeting, which was, it was scheduled, but he, didn't even flinch. He just got in. He set up his event for managing COVID patients. He trained his manager or his boss in 10 minutes. And he and his incident command team, which consisted of all the executives across the hospital, were up and running in a matter of days. They did it on their own, and they self-navigated through the learning process. And, they may have had a few bumps in the road here and there, and they called us. But when we got on the phone to kick off their project and talk about how they wanted to do the rollout, they were showing us their event log and all of the activity that they've been working on since they started 2 weeks ago, right after they signed the contract and we turned them on. So it's entirely possible to make it happen. And as I said, if the platform's easy and obvious how you use it, then it's going to make it that much more valuable for the people that are using it. And you can take advantage of it in the middle of a crisis while you're flying 500 miles an hour down the road.
Well, I'm sure he was grateful that he signed that contract. Sounds like timing was good. One of the lessons I have coming out of COVID-19 is that the healthcare organizations that had made the investments beforehand really benefited from those investments amidst the crisis. So, that's definitely a lesson learned. So, to kind of wrap this up, what are some of the other crises? And this is one of the fears I have. And, we talk about the second wave of patients that weren't going to the hospital and some of those things, but I think there's all these other crises and issues that, we weren't paying attention to because we're so busy with COVID, and rightly so. What are some of the other things you see in, crises that you were dealing with before COVID that, maybe need a little more attention now that COVID is somewhat stabilized, if you will? Are there other things? I mean, obviously hurricane season's upon us, flu season's coming, and we kind of talked about that. Are there others?
Yeah, I mean, just the influx of patients that are going to be coming back into the hospital once they start to feel comfortable about coming back to get treatment. So imagine all the everyday clinical events that have been put off for such a long time now. People were afraid to come into the hospital, and you're going to go back to the emergency department is above capacity. I don't have beds for all of the people that are in the ED. I need beds on the floors upstairs. I need transport to bring people upstairs and to move them around. All of this, going back to normal operation, not the normal craziness. I think they're going to be dealing with that on steroids. It's going to be much higher demand than it was before. And it's going to require folks to, again, from the lessons learned of dealing with COVID, they have to figure out how they can work collaboratively across department barriers and move people around and adapt dynamically to these changing conditions.
Well, thanks, Terry. Any final thoughts on what healthcare organizations should know about this, or any other thoughts on how to deal with the crisis?
Sure. I have one more thought that I'd like to share with your audience. What we've dealt with recently with COVID and how people have reacted to the situations that they were dealt with is an example of real-time healthcare and real-time situation management. I believe, and I think others are thinking the same thing, I'm sure I'm not alone, that this is really the future of healthcare. And what I hope I shared with you guys earlier today throughout these examples is that we have technology that can help health systems realize that vision of getting to operations in real time. Pre-COVID, people were focused on value-based care. How are they going to accelerate their process? Now we're dealing with making these changes instantly, making process changes that are sticking. They're good process changes. They're the right process changes. They're making healthcare more expedient. They're responding based on real-time information. They're becoming more lean organizations if you think about lean manufacturing and lean processing. And we think we have technology that helps people get there. These capabilities that I mentioned, I think are really important and helping people achieve the transformation that's in front of us to ultimately get to this real-time health system in the sky.
That's a great point, and I think we've all learned that healthcare organizations need to be prepared for these crises and make sure they have the technology and processes in place for it. So thanks so much. We've been here with Terry Zysk, CEO of LiveProcess. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, check it out at healthcareittoday.com. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you so much.